Hello, my name is Desiree Gray, and welcome to my installation project. So for this project, I wanted to honor Laverne Cox, who is the first trans woman to win an Emmy in an acting category. And I wanted to do this by recreating the dress she wore to the Emmys in 2019. This is a Monsoori gown. Monsoori is a Middle Eastern brand known for their over-the-top evening gowns worn on red carpets. So I started with a drawing, and the drawing helped me break down all of the elements of the dress. I broke down how many layers I was going to need, how thick they were each going to be, as well as all of the components needed to create the flower shoulder art piece that really took center stage of the bodice. So I first started with draping. I used bias tape to create the style lines and draped a shape that I thought resembled the original dress. This black fabric ended up being the lining of the bodice. And then I started working on the shoulder flower piece and created a shape that I liked. So time to move on to the skirt. So this was the pattern basically of the skirt. All of those orange lines represented a layer of ruffles. So on my cutting mat, I taped off the thickness of what each layer was going to be and used those lines as a guide so that each layer was the same thickness. In total, I would estimate that I cut probably 400 of these strips. It took months. It looks like this was all happening in the same day, but I was just wearing the same sweater. This took a very, very, very long time. But eventually I got through, and
2,000
it was
years
time
later.
to start the pleating. So every single ruffle on this skirt was done by hand. Each pleat was done by hand. I used a combination of 4-fold pleats and 2-fold pleats. So every layer or every tier of the skirt consists of 3 ruffle strips. One of the strips has a 4-fold pleat, and the other 2 strips have 2-fold pleats. It's kind of complicated, but when you're doing it, it makes sense. When you're physically there and you see how the skirt is constructed, it's a bit easier to understand. So here I am attaching the ruffles to the skirt itself. The farther along I got, the more difficult it became because there were so many ruffles to navigate, and I was using a domestic machine, and it's not easy pushing all those ruffles through my machine. So here I am, I got a ruffle, I put it in place, and I'm about to start sewing. Also, the farther along I got, the heavier the skirt got. By the end, the skirt was so heavy, it was really hard to hold while also sewing so that I would sew straight lines. But I pushed through. So here I am serging a waistband. And then I also created an underskirt, which was really just a long rectangular piece of fabric. So here I am attaching the underskirt to the ruffled skirt. This was not an easy task. Those ruffles will get in your way. They will make it as difficult as it can possibly be to see what you're doing. But they look so good in the end. And here I am attaching the waistband. Attaching the waistband was a bit easier than attaching the underskirt. And now that the skirt was finished, it was time to put the skirt over the dress form and into place. As I said before, the skirt was heavy, so this was not an easy task. I was struggling. But we made it work. So here is the finished skirt on the dress form. I think it looks really pretty. I'm very proud of it. This was an entire semester really in the making. And it looks really good. I'm proud. So for the bodice, I had my pieces draped, assembled, and it was time to iron them out so they were presentable, and then to start attaching them onto the dress form. The bodice was really just a matter of pinning and hand sewing. All of the pieces on the bodice were hand sewn on. Hand sewing, of course, is very time consuming, but it allows you to do things that you couldn't do on a machine. And of course, all these pieces are weird, odd shapes that getting them under the machine wouldn't really work. And I used a pillow as a tailor's ham because I don't have a tailor's ham at home. So here I am applying the bodice. I pinned it into place, and then I hand sewed it on. And each of these attachments, I like to call them the flower petals. For each of these, they were made with almost like a sandwich. So I had a piece of fabric, wire in between, and then another piece of fabric over that. So the wire was sandwiched in between two pieces of fabric, which was what helped create that shape, which gave it structure. It's almost like a sculpture I was folding and putting in place. And then I would pin, as you would see here, kind of just creating that shape, manipulating the fabric. Pin it into place, and then I would hand stitch it. Here I am hand stitching. This process took a very, very, very long time. I would work on it for a couple hours, take a break, do some schoolwork, next day work on it. So it took a long time, months. But if I didn't have anything else to do and I just focused on this, it would have gone a lot faster. And with the feathers, again, it was placing and then hand sewing. And with the feather placement, it was really just eyeballing it. I just went off of reference photos and what looked right, and putting the feathers in places where they fit. Here I am trimming some of the feathers. But once all of the feathers were on and sewn into place and trimmed, I added the belt, and the dress was complete. This project was rewarding. Seeing the final dress was rewarding. And I'm so proud of what I was able to accomplish. So here we have it, the final dress with the belt.